without access to a representative body which can defend the interests of the workers, or which is willing to bargain for their rights and entitlement, and which can provide access to institutions which enhance and even enforce these rights, the migrant workers will always be vulnerable. In the conduct of social policy, particularly in schemes of social protection, we see that the voice of migrant workers is really heard. And if that continues to be the case, then they will always be vulnerable. In the past, representation essentially has been provided by the trade unions. And the trade unions have been what the noted labor economist Guy Standing said, the swords of justice. It is because of the activities of the trade union that we see the wages rising, pension systems being established, narrowing of wage gaps, particularly between men and women, and even the reducing of the likelihood of non-compensated layoff and redundancies. But now, in this day and age, because of the changing labor relationships, which are in the wake of globalization policies, what we note is that the power of the trade unions is weakening. They're not being able to retain or get new members amongst their ranks. And it is quite clear that new forms of voice are essentially needed at all levels, at the local, national, and at the global level. And there is also the realization, and I was quite heartened by a breakthrough session that I attended day before yesterday, where there were presentations by my erstwhile colleague, Patrick Taran, Sanushka Modelaire, and Abdul Majid Al-Jamri, on the realization that there needs to be a coalition of organizations which can exert a greater influence rather than the sum of its parts. Now, new forms of organizations, of voice organizations, are coming up, and this is what some observers have called an associational revolution taking place. The old forms represented by the trade union and the organized church are more than offset by the rise of the NGOs and the civil society organizations. And they've been able to reach areas where the trade unions have not been able to go. So bringing reputable and responsible interest groups into the mainstream of policy making is essential, is crucial for the voices and for the interests of the workers to be protected. And one final point I would also make over here, that assisting trade unions and other groups to come together is a challenge for the ILO. And it remains part of a long-term agenda of securing greater rights for workers, and specifically migrant workers. In many of its programs now, ILO considers what kind of representation offers the optimal or the most promising avenues for securing social and economic rights. And this is the case here in Asia, where we are supporting the ASEAN Forum on International Migration, which is looking at that, the Triangle Project, and also in the Arab states, where we're increasingly working with the civil society. So unless we have this kind of a broad coalition, another point that Salah also sort of brought about, I mean, we can't get any further than that.
Thank you. All right, we're going to begin. I'm going to take the first question from the audience, so please be brief, and if you have a question, if you want to direct it to any one of the panelists, that's fine, or if you just direct it to all of them, that's also fine.
All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nancy. I come from the home organization in Singapore, and I come from Indonesia, working as domestic worker in Singapore. Talking about the human rights, it's supposed to be proposed that in every country, especially Indonesia. And my Mr. Henry, if you could have a look on the Indonesian government talking about the human rights, how the government treated us when we going back to Indonesia. They are not treating us so well, but instead they're giving us they call it a different service, like a domestic worker when arrive in Indonesia, they have to go in a certain a different airport in a certain area, which is more exploitation and sexual abuses going around there. And one more thing that the Indonesian government they call it, what would like to protect the domestic worker for Indonesian, to make those card, they call it KTKLN card, in order to protect the domestic worker. But instead of protecting that card, it's stupid card. It's not protecting at all. Instead of giving us a lot of trouble. And when we return home, we are as an Indonesian citizen. We are permanent residents, and they did not receive us as an Indonesian. They received us like, what? Please have a look on that. And please stop the government making those stupid cards, and it's not doing anything to protect us. And the airport is not the, immigration, the official immigration. Those people who are working in the airport, they don't have a right to stop us to stop us to flying back to the destination country when we are on the return on holiday. Who are they? The people who are able to stop us is the immigration. Because we don't have that stupid card, they stop us from returning to the destination country. Please have a look on that. We are human. Yes, we are domestic workers, but we are Indonesian. We are the citizen of Indonesia, and we are the hero of remitter for the country. Thank you.
Yeah, I think what is my sister side from the Indonesia, I think it's the sad issue for all of us, because that we think we must go to with the action together to against this policy, and I believe through this World Social Forum on Migrant, because not just farmers organization, but workers union in here, yeah, and with you migrant workers, I think we can build the solidarity action for this. And I believe we can build. We have started, yeah, for work together for the solving this, what you all mentioned, the issue. But we think we need more improving our strategy and our action, and more integration, and more permanent work. I think this is the important to us. Like example, we from the social movement, migrant farmers, and workers, to build like the post, yeah, like the we can say the direct action in the airport, like that. I think it's important because the migrant workers from Indonesia is the farmers, as the people in rural area, and I think it's the workers too, because then I think it's time for us in here to make the clear strategic action and the action plan, not waiting for the next year. Maybe in this year is important, because in the December many people from the abroad country will back as the migrant workers.
Thanks, Henry. I wanted to redirect a question here before we take another question from the floor, maybe to Ambet, who also gave us a specific challenge about the Qatar campaign. And, you know, as we just discussed, the extreme importance of solidarity, of supporting workers' movements. But how do we do that? I mean, this is a union-centered campaign. What would be the call to action? What is the message that we can expect from you, from participants at the World Social Forum on migration, and our organizations when we go back home?
Qatar is trying to buy the different international organizations by asking them, come to Qatar, we will host your conference. We will give money, because they are building up an international image. They are trying to make the international community accept them. despite the fact they have a lot of violations being done in their home country. The secret there is an international campaign. We should expose what are they doing with the migrant workers. I cannot accept, this year there are 2 United Nations conference in Qatar. And I think we should continue this. We should stop it. Our campaign is a bit, including the World Cup. So it is really an international campaign in your home country. Expose the situation in Qatar. It is only by exposing, then they will start talking to us, talking to the migrants. So for us, even we are also talking with multinational companies not to invest in Qatar. I think this is part of, of an international campaign, investment in terms of international conferences. The ILO, they organize the best party every year and invite everyone. So let's do that. And of course, the main issue that we will put forward is the issue of migrants. They approach us, that they say they are doing something about it. They are changing the law. It's not enough. They have to consult. They have to make their process transparent. Kefala system still, exists. The sponsorship system still exists. And workers don't have the right, migrant workers don't have the right to join unions. So this is my proposal. In your country, in all our meeting, let's focus on Qatar.
Thanks, Ambed. So I want to take a question from the floor, and also just a reminder to please keep your questions brief, and we'll get through more participants.
My name is Elizabeth Tang. I'm the International Coordinator of the International Domestic Workers Network. I'm pleased to hear some of the panel speakers speaking on their past experiences of working with domestic workers in their campaigns. Yes, indeed, domestic workers, many of them are victims, but at the same time, we know we are not necessarily to be always victims. We do have powers. And actually, we are planning to have our founding congress to build a global organization of domestic workers next year in Uruguay. And I think we'll slowly be strong enough to make our part, to make our contribution. So my question to the panel speaker is, what do you think will be some of the roles we can play in strengthening, building social movements to make alternatives?
Any more panels? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. This is one of the things that I had heard, the question that you've just raised now. In saying, yes, we do need international solidarity, we do need cross-border campaigns, but yes, as advocacy groups, as the labor movement, but the people really who hold the power are the migrants themselves in the various sectors where they work. So what we need to be doing is really to engage with the migrants where they are, for them to organize themselves, and for us to really provide that support to elevate their own struggle to the next level until we reach the international campaigning level. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take the next question on over here.
Thank you. My question is directly to Mr. Amjad Yusan from BWI. I live in Qatar and I've been working on migrant worker issues there for a while now. And my question is this. Have you worked directly or have you contacted the Qatar Supreme Committee, and what has been their response? And don't you think that sometimes it might be more effective to work on those bridges rather than perhaps possibly burning them if you try to exert too much pressure internationally on Qatar? And can you give a little more detail about what the response has been from Qatar when you tried contacting them?
Okay, we had some informal negotiation with the Minister of Labor. And they said they are changing their labor laws. They are looking at different models, but they won't tell us. You know, they are looking at the model of Saudi Arabia, of having workers' committee. So we told them, you have Bahrain. In Bahrain, there's democratic union and migrant workers are allowed. But this is, you know, they are not transparent in terms of the reforms they are doing. So I think the pressure is not that strong yet. I mean, we have, for me, that's the best way to pressure Qatar is at the international level. It is the image that they are concerned with. When we talk about the ground operation in Qatar, it's very difficult. You cannot expose the workers. You know, you organize and they protest there, they will be sent home. We have members, we are organizing in Qatar, but quietly. But we are not. So we are also discussing with multinational companies. Multinational companies now, like a Spanish company building the biggest hospital in Qatar, 8,000 workers. You have the Norwegian Hydro aluminum company working 20,000 workers. We are talking to them and they are implementing labor laws. You know what's the answer of the Qatari people? The Qatari government? Don't give them too high salary because they are raising up the standard in Qatar. You know, so this is, but we are working with the multinational. We are complaining and we are pushing on FIFA. You know FIFA, no? We told FIFA you should have not awarded the World Cup to Qatar in 2022. We are still not giving up on that. We are getting a lot of support because FIFA's credibility is at stake here. Thank you.
Just to sort of go back on that thing, I mean, somebody who's been working very actively in Qatar, I mean, there is a ITUC campaign on no workers' rights, no World Cup in Qatar, but there's also been criticism from Human Watch International, right, so, you know? And that Human Rights Watch report was quite it was a damning indictment of those labor practices that were there. But to give them some credit, actually, because of these criticism and because of these pressures, now the ministry is looking towards developing better labor practices, and they've invited the ILO, and we've been working with them now for the last year or so, and improving the structures that are there. There is an inherent problem there. The problem, I mean, which was related to by Ambit just a while ago, is that, you know, they have a labor law. Now, the labor law essentially creates some kind of a balance in the relationship between the employer and the employee in terms of rights and obligations. And they have the kafala system. Now, the kafala system gives too much right to the employer, who can then dictate the conditions of work and the wages to the worker. And the problem here is, which applies? And it's like having your cake and eating it too, you know? I mean, that kind of a situation where the labor law, there are certain stipulates of that they adhere to, but also they abide by the kafala. And that creates a problem in the processes and in the labor practices.
Thank you. All right, I can go to the next question.
Okay, good morning everyone. I'm Joselito Natividad of the Asia Pacific Mission for Migrants. One of our concerns right now, and which will also be taken up in a poster session right after this, and of course everyone is invited, is about wage discrimination and erosion in destination countries. Because there is a tendency for the wage gap between migrant workers and local workers to drive down wages in general. Now this question is directed to Mr. Khan, but the others can also answer. How do you propose to act against this tendency for these destination countries to exclude migrant workers from coverage of the minimum wage?
Look, if I speak from the perspective of the region where I come from and where I'm working, there are no minimum wage regimes in these countries. As a matter of fact, when you look at the situation, migrant workers constitute the majority of the workforce. In Qatar, 94% of the workforce is of migrant workers. In the UAE, 90% of the workers are migrant workers. The same is the situation in all the other countries, even though in Saudi Arabia and in Oman, where the population, the national population is greater, but when you come to the workforce, the migrant workers are in a majority. And this is something which we feel that a migrant minimum wage regime can be introduced. I mean, in terms of a just dues being paid to the workers and what is fair. But this has not been taken on board. But what we have been pushing for is for some wage determination mechanism in all sectors, which should apply. Many of these things have been handled through bilateral agreements which have been developed between the countries of origin and the countries of destination. Most recently by the Philippines with Saudi Arabia. But I'm not a great fan of these bilateral agreements, because what does it mean? Does it mean that if Philippines has an agreement with Saudi Arabia, that the Filipino workers would be treated better than the Ethiopian workers or the Sri Lankan workers? Or that the Sri Lankans and the Ethiopian government would have to have similar bilateral agreements over there? Or who's going to monitor these kind of agreements, right? And there is also some kind of a competition going on between the countries of origin who are actually pricing down their own workers. I met one ambassador of a country of origin who said to me, well, why don't they hire workers from our countries? We are the cheapest. Now that's certainly not the way to go. And so we have to sort of think about it.
Okay, before we take another question from the floor, I just want to redirect the question to Pablo, who talked to us about, I think, some of the urgency of the climate issues and their impacts. And I think we all understand, there is a level of urgency. It's also a big question, and it's not, the connection is not something that the migrants' rights movement has, we don't have a long track record in engaging it. And I'm just wondering what you would challenge us, to take from this conference in terms of how we can be more proactive in connecting and actually beginning to take action. What would you say to us? Because I think every year that goes by where we're not actively interacting with this is a loss. So what would you bring to us?
I think that we have to see the issue of migration in a much bigger picture. One aspect has to do with labor rights. It is very important. But we have economical causes of migration, environmental causes, and also conflicts and wars. I think this panel reflects different causes. And environmental causes of migration are going to be huge in the coming years. The food crisis, because of climate change, is going to affect many of the countries, especially here in Asia. And if we only focus, and I'm not saying that it's not important, it's very important, on labor rights, we're going to miss that movement of migration that is going to happen. And it's not going to be international migration in the first place. It's going to be more what Henry said. It's going to be migration from rural areas to the cities. And we have to take into account that kind of migration too. Because that is when migration begins. If we don't promote and support initiatives like agroecology, food sovereignty, if we don't address those issues, then the only thing that remains is to be at the defensive. Because then it's too late. So I think we have to be more at the offensive in this issue. We have to preserve and fight for the rights of migrants and all humans, but we have to address why this phenomenon is happening. And global warming is not a natural disaster. It's a cause of a system. 2/3, we're speaking about Qatar. You know, the problem of climate change is that 2/3 of the fossil fuels have to remain under the ground, cannot be exploited. If they are exploited, if we send them to the atmosphere, then we're going to have an increase in the temperature of more than 2 degrees Celsius. So, when we discuss the issue of Qatar, Qatar has enough money. Probably they will be able to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, but that's not really the key question. The key question is, what's the amount of fossil fuels of Qatar and region and all around the world that are going to be burned? We need to think on a different kind of society. And I think migrants have to see themselves more as part of social movements and not as a movement as only as such. That is the key. Migrants, in the case of my country, Bolivia, are the peasant movement. We don't have migrant movement, except when they are outside, but when they have left the country. But inside the country, they are very active in the movements that we have, especially the peasants and indigenous movements.
Thanks, Juan. Next question.
I'm Khalid Mahmood, Director of Labour Education Foundation from Pakistan. Comrade Chair took my both questions actually, but I can comment. I have 2 comments actually. When we are talking about building or developing global